Welcome, good morning, or depending on where you are in the world, good afternoon, good evening. I am happy to present with Mr. Shaun Grannis today on the history of the Indiana Health Information Exchange and Regenstrief Institute's collaboration. Our goal today is to talk a bit about just the history of the Institute and the Health Information Exchange and how that partnership began and has evolved and exists today. Most of you know me, Shaun Grannis. I'm the Vice President for Data and Analytics here at the Institute and a professor at the IHIE School of Medicine. What's not on this list, and what some of you may not know, is that I also serve as the Chief Medical Information Officer for IHIE as well, so I have many hats. John, do you want to introduce yourself here?
Good afternoon. I know many of you, but not everyone. I've been around these parts a long time. Shaun Grannis, the CEO of IHIE, and like Shaun, I remembered this morning to add to the bottom of my list that I'm also a board member of the Regenstrief Institute. So appreciate being invited to speak today.
All right. So very quickly, we have no relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies. So just a quick notice there. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we want to give folks a better understanding of where IHIE came from, how Regenstrief is related to IHIE, and how we work together. So here you can see our learning examples, understanding the genesis, how IHIE's grown, examples of the collaborations, and perspectives on the future of interoperability and IHIE and future collaboration opportunities. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, John, for the current state.
So as Shaun mentioned, we thought it might be interesting to talk about briefly where IHIE came from, how it's progressed and matured, and how over the decades the Institute and IHIE have worked together. If I get any of the history wrong, Dr. Tierney is here to correct anything I get wrong. A few slides on kind of current state snapshot of IHIE. Some of these things you may know, some of them you may not. We now serve the entire state and strive to be the health data utility for Indiana. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that term later in the presentation. We've been around for nearly 2 decades. We celebrate our 20-year anniversary in February of next year. With our roots obviously dating back to the pioneering work done here at the Institute, which is more like 3 decades ago, starting in the mid-90s. Our board composition is hospital system executives, healthcare associations representing different segments of healthcare, academia. Dr. Rachel Patzer is on our board, as has been every CEO and acting CEO of the Institute since the beginning of time. We also have representatives from state government and public health on our board. Like the Institute, we're a 501c3 supporting organization. We tout our Regenstrief Institute partnership as we travel and present nationally. And for those of you that know what HITRUST certification is, we are HITRUST certified. The market increasingly cares about privacy and security, and that's the industry standard in healthcare. And we have about 100 employees. Yes, sir.
One thing I would point out on this slide is if you look at IHIE's mission, it is very similar to Regenstrief's mission. They achieve that mission through different means, through focusing on health information exchange, where we focus on research and innovation, but we're both interested in improving health and healthcare.
Yeah, Dr. Grant, for those of you online, Dr. Grannis just pointed out the similarities in the mission between the two organizations. A couple of pictures demonstrating the footprint, what we call the footprint of IHIE. This is sort of a physician practice and provider view. The tiny little blue plus signs are practices that we serve in one way or another. And there's about 19,000 of them across roughly a 5-state area. There's some beyond that, but really it's unsurprisingly Indiana and the neighboring states. If you look at it through a hospital view, it's taken many, many years, much fossil fuels burned, many tires worn out, many phone lines burned up to build this participation in the INPC, but nearly all hospitals in the state now participate. Not all, but nearly all. You may not be aware of the services that we provide. It may not be relevant to your work, but IHIE has over the years grown to have 3 service lines. What we call One Care is for point of care, supporting point of care healthcare. Pop Care is for population health products, things that are done at the population level. And Gov Care, or things that we do for government, state and federal, is a growing sector of what we do. Why you may care is because it's through these services that we're able to build participation that leads to data in the INPC that supports research, and also because these services generate funding to fund the INPC. Okay. That was just a kind of snapshot of IHIE today. Let's talk about some of the hopefully interesting, where did it come from and how have we changed over the years? So just some historical milestones. Remember that, well, IHIE is founded in 2004, but 10 years prior to that, Regenstrief launched the INPC, starting with large hospital systems in Indianapolis. And it was really one of the things I've learned from the Institute, especially early in my career, is the ability to sort of align the planets, not just of technology, but technology and the realities of healthcare, the incentives of the different parties in healthcare, and being able to thread the legal needles on data use that's very difficult. And so forming the INPC wasn't just figuring out that HL7 messages could move data between disparate organizations. It meant understanding that there could be something in it that would motivate hospital systems and providers to participate, that it could lead to a large data asset to support research, but that it was legally difficult but possible to build this what's frankly a legally defined, contractually defined data cooperative that's grown to be statewide. But the brilliance of that 30 years ago can't be overstated. It wasn't until 10 years later that IHIE was formed, because some of the things Regenstrief had done and was starting to do were having enough success that they were becoming a pain in your neck. You know, you really don't want the night nurse from Unit X at Hospital Y calling you in the middle of the night for support because they can't log into Docs4Docs or CareWeb. So that's, you know, there needed to be a business entity to support and promote and grow the things that had been born at the Institute. I really like to view that as something Sam Regenstrief really would have appreciated, because he was very much about he was very much about doing things that actually impacted healthcare, and taking the work of the Institute and putting it in the hands of a business entity like IHIE so we could serve the healthcare in Indiana statewide. I think that's something he would have been very proud of. Between 2008 and 2012, you'll see this graphically later, it was a period of dramatic growth of the INPC. Later, there was a period that IHIE really was growing and maturing as a company. Maturity is important, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. And then in 2020, this is a very short version of the story, but there had been a health information exchange in Bloomington, a larger, older one in South Bend. But as of 2020, we consolidated all those things into the Indiana Health Information Exchange, and we are now the sole statewide HIE in Indiana. This is where I'd invite Dr. Tierney to add anything he wants to throw in the mix. But where did IHIE come from? In about 2002, there was some business leaders that formed with the modest name, the Central Indiana Coalition to Reinvent Healthcare. But really their focus with some startup dollars from Health and Hospital Corporation was to figure out how to apply this newfangled IT stuff to the challenges of healthcare. And one of the things that emerged from that, very short version of a very long story, was that IHIE was launched a couple of years later, and IHIE only started with the Docs for Docs results delivery service. That was basically our initial focus. Stakeholders in the creation of IHIE included the Institute, but also BioCrossroads and Indianapolis-based hospital systems. The seed money came from, as I mentioned, the Health and Hospital Corporation of Marion County, which is the parent company for Eskenazi, but also eventually from the Indianapolis-based hospitals that would be the original providers, original beneficiaries of the Docs for Docs service. And most of you probably know this, but maybe not. Dr. Mark Overhage was the first CEO of IHIE. Well, he was also the director of CBMI at Regenstrief, which means he could do part-time, which now takes me full-time to do. Evolution of the INPC. I never said this until I did these slides the other day, but I thought that really makes sense, is as goes the INPC, so goes IHIE. And what I mean by that is that the data in the stewardship of IHIE, that is the INPC data asset, is the basis of the value that we produce to fulfill our mission. And a brief history of the INPC, and then followed by some cool graphs and pictures in a minute. In the era 1993 to 2003, Dr. McDonald and Regenstrief, others as well, invented the INPC. And as I referred to earlier, that means that Regenstrief had to do the technical, political, and legal work to bring that into being. Regenstrief brought tens of billions of dollars of grants over the years to Indiana to fund the, frankly, proving that there could be such a thing as the INPC, that it would work, and funding its costs in the early years. At that time, it was 15 hospitals across the 5 Indianapolis-based systems. Then over about the next decade, when IHIE was established, we were supporting customers, participants in the INPC, promoting INPC participation statewide. Operations largely remained at the Institute, but we're slowly but surely starting to transition to IHIE. And importantly, in 2010, IHIE launched what in the vernacular of my side of the world we would call a business model, which is how do you charge participants a fee to fund, help pay the operational costs of the INPC. And that in those days was primarily or almost exclusively from hospitals. It's diversified some over the years. And then finally, 2014 to the present, INPC participation continued to grow, but more slowly, but we were adding some diversity to the participation with payers and labs and imaging centers and government entities, et cetera. IHIE took over the operations of the INPC during that period. And interestingly, and I could come back and do another talk if this one isn't boring, interoperability became a national issue with state and federal governments getting involved during that period. There was a long period of time, especially since the Institute really was one of the pioneers, and there really wasn't a thing called Health Information Exchange until Regenstrief sort of started doing it in the 1990s, and it wasn't even called that for a long time after that. But at some point in time, governments started paying attention, and I don't want to say messed everything up, but it was different when all we had to worry about was Indiana, the INPC, and whether everybody was happy. I'm not going to cover this slide in detail because it's super boring, but the point of this slide is that IHIE has not been standing still during that time. And I was employee number 18 in 2007. We now have about 100 employees. So let me just hit some of the highlights here over the last decade plus. Is that some of these things you won't necessarily even know what they are, but they're things you need to do to be a statewide health information exchange. We created a product management function. We implemented Agile Scrum development methodology more than a decade ago. We did our first formal strategic planning in 2015 and have been through refresh cycles twice, including last year. Launched additional product lines. We have a Fire-based app in production, partly thanks to Dr. Schleier. We passed our high trust security certification and have kept that certification current. We've implemented internal roadmaps, consolidated with MIN, and over 2014 to the present have gotten involved in a number of national interoperability organizations. Some of them you may recognize, some of you may not, but eHealth Exchange, Patient Centered Data Home, Sequoia Project, which is, well, won't go into that. Consortium for State and Regional Interoperability, Civitas Networks for Health are organizations we participate in leadership. Okay, finally, a couple pictures. I wanted to give you a couple snapshots of how the INPC has grown to the benefit of all, the members, to the benefit of researchers over the years. This is just a picture from 2004 to 2012. Really need to update this, but this was the period of significant growth, as you see. Health insurers, labs, physician groups, and other agencies. This is just new hospital members on this graph, but other types of participants have also joined and started to join the data cooperative later in the process. I only have 3 data points because this was actually kind of hard to find going back into history, but this is based on the number of data elements in the INPC. I had an early data point from 2005, found one from 17 and 22. But you can see that in terms of data volume, the INPC is 22 times the size it was in 2005 even. And we have an animated version of this, but this seemed like the easiest way to present this. This is by county in and around Indiana on which the INPC has data. Dark colors are 90 to 100. Light colors are like 0 to 10. I can't read the legend, it's too small. But point being that that's what happened in 10 years. And I'm waiting for the updated graph because some of the organizations in Indiana were motivated during the pandemic to join and participate in INPC. So it will be even darker, especially in Northeast Indiana. Almost done, and I will hand the baton to Dr. Grannis. But looking forward, what's next for IHIE? Each one of these could be a boring talk, so I'll just kind of introduce them. Health data utility is a new concept that's emerged in the last few years, guiding HIEs to serve a broader range of health data needs in their state. If you Google health data utility, you will see that I'm not making that up. I didn't just make this term up in the parking lot. It's sweeping the nation. State government and expanded collaboration and support of state government agencies is going to be an important thing that we need to do. It's just because of the history of how IHIE developed and how the INPC developed. We have less of a state government relationship than some other statewide health information exchanges, but we have more of a private sector and research relationship than most health information exchanges. TEFCA, if you don't know what TEFCA is, it's a new government-defined health data interoperability ecosystem that we have to figure out how to operate within. And then interstate and multi-state HIE is very much more a thing in the last 5 years than it was previously, and still a very active area. There are now at least 4 multi-state health information exchange organizations that are peers of IHIE, if you will. We are not an interstate or a multi-state HIE. And then finally, hopefully a little bit entertaining, I had one or two trivia points about IHIE, Regenstrief, and myself. And after I started thinking about it, I found some more. The consultant who was hired to form IHIE and get it started was a guy named Dr. Mickey Tripathi, who is now the head of the ONC. He learned what he learned. His first things he learned about HIE was here in Indiana, and he references that often from national podiums. Number two, when I came to work for IHIE in 2007, Mark Overhage, Tom Penno, our COO, Deb Hemler, if you know her, and I all shared one office in the basement of what is now Lyfomic. And if that isn't amusing enough, there was an office next door that had one guy in it, and to this day, I don't know why. IHIE was not the first HIE in the country. The Michiana Health Information Network in South Bend was founded in 1998 or 99. I'm not sure, but MN consolidated with IHIE, so now, are we the first? I don't know, it's kind of like piece of trivia. And my two favorites, early Regenstrief pioneer and Sam Regenstrief's nephew-in-law, Dr. Harvey Feigenbaum, went to high school with my mom. They were valedictorians in, I think, subsequent years. Whatever I've done in my career, my mom was never so impressed as to find out that I knew Harvey Feigenbaum. And then finally, my sister, who worked for a steel company in the 1980s, used to call on the factory in Connersville where they made the dishwashers. Okay, Shaun, beat that.
All right, so I am going to be talking about what we're doing together, what we've done together, what we're doing together, and think a little bit about the future. I want to emphasize a point that I think is relevant to what we do here at Regenstrief. And, you know, people think about the Health Information Exchange, and often through the years, people have said, what an amazing technical innovation that was. And my response was, no, it wasn't. The innovation there was getting a lot of human beings who are running in different directions with different opinions and different viewpoints and values to come together to agree to do this thing. And as we think about translational research, as we think about how our research can impact healthcare and health outcomes, we not only have to have good data that's convincing, but we also have to be able to convince those people who actually deliver care that there is value in this. And it's super important that whatever research we're working on, we're thinking about what kind of impact will this have. Yes, I can publish in a highly impactful journal, but also, and to, I think, Sam Regenstrief's vision, how is this going to make a difference in the real world? And to make a difference in the real world, you not only need to have a good idea, you have to have an idea that's going to make a difference to the people who use your ideas, who use your technology, who use your different care management and processes. And so I think that was really one of the core successes of the Health Information Exchange, was recognizing a way to satisfy the many varied needs of different healthcare organizations. I think that's a super important point to keep in mind. I'm going to talk about our history of collaborations. I'm going to run through a list, perhaps quickly. If anybody has questions about these, we can certainly make time in the discussion section. So as John has already described, Regenstrief staff and faculty played an important role in developing the infrastructure of the original INPC, the user interface, the user experience that physicians and other users of the Health Information Exchange used. And that was a collaborative process, as John described. Over the years, we began to hand off that work to them and worked with them on modifying and moving forward. This makes me think of something. So CareWeb is an old interface now. Back then, it was brilliant, it was wonderful, it was awesome. It was the best transfer of DOS interface into the web you'd ever want to see. when I say DOS, how many people know what that means? Okay, wow, man, everybody who's raising their hands has a little bit more gray hair than everybody else. MS-DOS, disk operating system, was the original Microsoft operating system that was a command line prompt. But anyways, I actually, when I say converting DOS to the web, that was meant as a joke because that wasn't, the greatest thing in the world. But the point I wanted to make is IHIE has created something I think is pretty amazing, and that's their new CDS, clinical data search function that you guys don't talk about a lot, and I have no idea why you don't talk about it more, because it's like the modern era user interface that's very powerful. And people, I don't see Thunkum here today, but I know that one of the projects that we have underway, that Thunkum has a research project, and they're working with IHIE to think about how to use this new, much more efficient, effective interface for dental informatics as well. So, but anyways, we worked together on the first Care Web interface. Docs for Docs, a little bit more detail on that. Hospitals and labs generate results. They generate laboratory results, they have dictations, there's all kinds of information that gets generated. That has to be delivered back to the provider. And so Docs for Docs is kind of a play on documents for doctors. Back in the day, when you delivered these results, each individual laboratory result, that was costly. And each hospital had to do it in some way, health system, and they often did it in different ways, using different technology, different standards, et cetera. Couriers, people, carrying the envelopes. The first significant value proposition that allowed IHIE to start generating revenue was to tell these healthcare systems, look, we can deliver your results much more efficiently, much less expensively, and they did. And Docs for Docs was the infrastructure that allowed physicians and nurses to log in and view results, and to also make sure that those results were delivered to the appropriate place. A lot of faxed documents back then in the day. Are documents still being faxed at D4D?
Into, unfortunately, EHR, electronic interfaces. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so fax is still out there. Quality Health First was a large initiative. The Beacon, wasn't that part of the Beacon project? Or no, am I conflating? Yeah, but so Quality Health First was a way of capturing clinical data to evaluate the quality of care. So, many payers like to see how physicians and healthcare systems are doing when they deliver care. And Quality Health First was a first try at that process. John, I don't know if you want to say more about that, but
really quickly, Quality Health First was really brilliant. Credit to Mark Overhidge, Dave Kelleher, I think primarily, in that not only did Regenstrief do the analytics work to measure like 29 different primary care measures, but there was a whole system whereby physician practices had economic incentives to improve their measures, and the insurance companies had agreed to pay those incentives based on the measures. And getting all those organizations and players to agree was no small problem.
Yeah, so that was a significant collaboration, pretty large. Early, the federal government for years, for over a decade now, has been wanting to see a more national approach, consistent approach for exchanging data, and they've been through several revisions of that approach. There used to be the NIN, the National Health Information Network, then there was the new HIN, and way back in the day when we were first imagining how to perform health information exchange, the federal government set up some processes whereby the Social Security Administration could ping clinical data sources to help them validate disability claims. And so this was a process to help the Social Security Administration improve its efficiency. The VA wanted data as well. I don't recall specifically what their use case was, but Brian Dixon and I'm sure David Hagstrom could say more about that. But we developed some processes back in the day, worked with IHIE on that, and eventually handed over that functionality to IHIE around the time that we were handing over a lot of other HIE functionality to IHIE as well. And that is still running, correct? Yes, yeah, it's ongoing. The notifiable condition detector, many of you have heard about this. We know that doctors, labs, hospitals are supposed to be reporting notifiable diseases like chlamydia, gonorrhea, HIV, COVID-19 to public health. We know that physicians, hospitals, and laboratories do a lousy job of reporting. So we first, Mark Overhage and some other folks, you're hearing Mark's name a lot, way back in the late 1999s, early 2000s, built the initial version of this system, fairly simple. As we move forward, Dr. Brian Dixon and I created version 2 of the system. Increasingly, there was interest in seeing that that type of functionality be used for meaningful use. So the government again said, we would like to see electronic health records be able to report notifiable diseases to public health. IHIE was able to implement the NCD in their system. We had run it mostly as a research project on our side, though it was a production system. We handed it off to IHIE when the demand began to be so much greater. Since that time, Dr. Dixon and myself have periodically offered guidance and advice from the cheap seats to IHIE for that. Similar story with FES. How many people know what FES is? Shahid, don't raise your hand. I joked about Shahid because basically FES is the Public Health Emergency Surveillance System for Indiana. Back in right after 9/11, there were some anthrax envelopes sent. People began to be worried about bioterrorism. So the federal government gave the CDC millions of dollars. Indiana received a significant portion to build out a monitoring system to be able to monitor trends in emergency departments, and Shahid built FES for us. So back in the day, we had, John pointed out the burned rubber and the gasoline expended. Well, Shahid did a lot of the work for building out the FES system, which still runs today. And so that system was built here at Regenstrief and then transitioned to IHIE, where it was taken over, and they've evolved it and obviously found ways to make it sustainable and operational long term. So FES was also, there's so many interesting stories. So how many people know what a T1 line is? T1 line, yeah, again, all the gray-haired people. So originally, T1 lines were rented lines from phone companies where you had to pay thousands of dollars a month for these network connections. That's how data was moved in the original Health Information Exchange. But round about 2001 through 4, this thing called the internet was happening. And we realized that we could run secure networking over the internet and save a lot of money. So one of the other things that Shahid really helped to lead was to transition us off of those very expensive, rented, old technology lines to the internet where we are today. And so FES actually helped play an important role in the core infrastructure evolution of the Institute. Pandemic collaborations. I think there are a lot of stories to be told here, and we've talked about it in many of these presentations. Obviously, when COVID hit, everyone was all hands on deck. There have been, rightly so, people are concerned and want to make sure that they are sharing data for good purposes. Over the years, we have worked with many partners to try to convince them to send data to the HIE and become part of the HIE. The COVID pandemic helped that happen and accelerated data sharing because people were willing to put their foot in the water. And once they tried it, the water temperature is pretty nice, sure enough. And what I mean by the water temperature being very nice is Data was secured, it was used for the appropriate purposes, people felt comfortable being a part of the information exchange as they have been throughout the years, and so the pandemic really accelerated that. What did we do together with IHIE? Well, we developed vaccine data sharing, where the state would share immunization data from their immunization registry. We were able to finally get a feed from the state for mortality data on a regular real-time basis. We were able to begin exchanging COVID lab results. The state's lab results would be shared with the IHIE. The IHIE would share lab results with them. We helped the state build dashboards with the data that IHIE was helping to exchange. So there was, Regenstrief could not do what it did during the pandemic without IHIE, and IHIE couldn't do what it did to help the state during the pandemic without Regenstrief. And obviously there were many other players in that, but I think those necessary but not sufficient statement applies. So there's been a lot of collaborations going on. Now, ongoing collaborations. I move to my images. I really like just putting images up there, so now you can look at this and think, what is that? What? This is a collaboration according to AI. So I told it to generate an image representing collaboration between a healthcare research organization and a health information exchange. This is what it came up with. So I'm going to talk to you about some ongoing collaborations right now. Presently, we have a working group led by Kelly IHIE on IHIE side, and I'm helping to lead that with Faye and others on the Regenstrief side. We know that data can always be improved, and the quality of the INPC data can be improved. There's gaps in that, and so we've prioritized high-value data elements that we want to go after, and we're working through the process of evaluating current state, determining strategies for improving that, and acting on that and continuing to measure our progress there. So we've worked on race and ethnicity, which is at about 80% completeness. We're working on vital signs. We're working on encounter data. I know there's many more. I can't remember the list, but that is a group that meets regularly, meets monthly, and are working together to generate analyses and develop strategies for improving the data. CCD parsing. We need medication data for some of the work that we're doing to track COVID-19 long-term. So we need to understand what medications people are taking. We need better medication data in the health information exchange. IHIE receives transitions of care documents that are not flowing into the IHIE right now because they're kind of a different document. They're a CCD document, which isn't the traditional sort of format for receiving that. For this long COVID work we're doing with the CDC, we're actually going to be extracting, actually had a meeting on this morning, we're going to be extracting medication data out of these documents and making it available in the INPC. So that benefits users of the health information exchange to get better medication data, and also benefits us on our research project. Immunization data exchange, I've already mentioned that we now have a more responsive connection to the state's immunization registry. We are on the vaccine effectiveness side. We are working with IHIE to get more vaccine data from the state immunization registry. We are expanding beyond COVID to RSV and influenza vaccines from the state registry, and IHIE is helping us with that. Indiana has its new Indiana Health First initiative to expand and improve the public's health here in the state. As a part of that initiative, they want to understand baseline rates for conditions such as obesity and other to-be-named clinical conditions that they want to work on. We are working with IHIE, who is helping us to extract the data, understand the best approach to that, and Regenstrief is working on analyzing that data for the state. So we're both working together, supporting the state there. The Office of the National Coordinator, Mickey Tripathi, the first CEO of IHIE, his organization has funded something called a federated learning project, with multiple health information exchanges in the country. The goal there is to be able to share de-identified data in a way to train models like AI models, machine learning models, but to do so without actually moving any data outside of the HIE. So it's called a split learning or a federated learning or shared learning model, and we're working with IHIE and ONC on that to implement that work as well. There are other initiatives, for example, the IUCAR Susan Hickman, the Kathleen Unrose project, when it was a research project, what was it called? Optimistic, yes, thank you. So the Health Information Exchange supported optimistic work, and now that initiative has been translated into a real-world successful process, and IHIE continues to provide data interfaces to that ongoing project as well. So that's a great example of where the Health Information Exchange provided data for research, and now as that research evolves, IHIE is providing data to the organization as well. So those are some examples of ongoing activities right now, and there's probably many more. So then the next question is, how does IHIE support Regenstrief in its research? And we've got about 50 minutes left, so I'm going to blast through the rest of these. But IHIE supports research in three primary ways. Number one, it provides data into the INPCR database, which many of us use for research. So that's the simple ongoing one. Number two, IHIE is often a collaborator, a subcontractor on research grants, and they do that periodically when there's a right and appropriate fit. The data is the most common way. Participating on grants is less common, but it happens with regularity. The third way is the less frequent way and typically requires a lot more planning, and those are projects like we mentioned, Titus's work with fire. That involves workflow and technology with changing that or modifying or extending it within the system. I believe Thuncom's work on dental informatics as well involves modifying or extending the actual system, not just the data, but actually the technology that supports the data. And that's the third way. Again, that is less frequent, takes a lot of planning, preparation, and approval and alignment of goals. But those are really the three primary words: data, subcontracting collaborator, and working to extend workflows and functionality within the system. And IHIE provides, we are in an incredibly unique position as a research organization to be able to have those capabilities in our menu of options as researchers. How does Regenstrief support IHIE? I've already mentioned some of those ways. We work on the data quality collaboration, bringing our analytical and clinical data expertise. We help provide grant support for mutually beneficial activities. We provide public health and clinical subject matter expertise. So clinical informatics, aging expertise. So John works very closely with people like Kathleen Unroe on state policy issues. And so this isn't just an informatics collaboration. David Hagstrom does a lot of work with HIE and is supported, his research is supported by the HIE significantly. So there's that sort of work. And Regenstrief can provide propeller-headed insights into the future as well, for example, on AI and other trends that we think are going to be important moving forward. So there is truly a significant collaboration there. John, there was a saying that I thought we added, and I don't see it in here now. But
basically, what we were discussing when we were planning this talk was that something that isn't a collaboration you can point to, but the work of Regenstrief and the work of IHIE are what makes the INPC ecosystem, it's what enables there to be that ecosystem. the leaders of the Institute and the leaders of IHIE know that sometimes we have to do hard work and figure out how to pay for that hard work, and many other organizations benefit from the existence of the INPC, the research that the Institute does, and they just, I don't know, take it for granted is a little bit trite, but the point being, IHIE and Regenstrief enable the INPC ecosystem.
Yeah, great. Well, that brings us to the end of what we were presenting today. Again, our goal was to give you a sense of where the HIE came from, what role Regenstrief had in that, how we've continued to work together. We haven't talked a lot about the future. There's no future on here, right? We didn't talk about the future.
You can talk about the future. We can talk about the future.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, you mentioned something, TEFCA. I think the federal government is always trying to find ways to get all of the states to work together and do things in a standard way. Staying on top of that, I think, is important. John is so arguably one of the, at least a national leader on TEFCA and those issues from the HIE perspective.
I have a front row seat whether I like it or not.
Yeah. And so understanding those trends, I think, are going to be increasingly important to all of us as healthcare increasingly becomes a data-driven activity. So I think understanding those pieces are going to be important. Yeah, anything else?
Could we take questions if there are some?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, okay. All right.
In the chat, they've been primarily discussing your use of AI with the images.
Okay.
And how you did it and all this type of thing, and which you use. So
okay. All right.
What's going on in the chat?
Yeah. Buy me a cup of coffee and I'll tell you how I did it. So, all right, Titus.
Thank you. Viewed in the aggregate, this, of course, is a very impressive set of accomplishments, infrastructure, and so on. Operationally, and in the next few years, how could we turbocharge that? We're writing a strategic plan right now. So one of my questions was IHIE, in those discussions? Shaun, you will remember. Not too long ago when Peter was here, we had meetings with IHIE, every 2 months or 3 months. Lots of good ideas, but, I haven't seen yet the kind of outcome of that. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Let me take a quick crack at that and you can go, John. So finding ways to collaborate even among organizations who are aligned in the ways that IHIE and Regenstrief are doing, it's hard because there's reality out there. There's IHIE's role is to make sure that their customers are supporting in the excellent delivery of healthcare. We are interested in innovating in healthcare, and there's a lot of overlap, but sometimes that overlap doesn't necessarily follow to the figuring out how to financially make some of these things happen is really an important point. So I'm going to give an example where I don't have the solution to the financial picture, but I think this would accelerate as you talk about, Titus. And I think you and I have talked about this, and maybe with IHIE. So creating a sandbox environment where we can test ideas without disrupting IHIE's business would be great. Challenge with that, IHIE doesn't have the funds and the people to create a sandbox for us. If we wanted to make an investment in HIE population-based research, investing in creating a sandbox that leverages the IHIE infrastructure would be one of the ways to accelerate, I think, dramatically accelerate research in that sort of third uncommon area that I mentioned.
I'm going to pick up where Shaun left off a little bit. First, some concrete things is I just shared the public view of our strategic plan with Joyce, who asked for it to inform Regenstrief's strategic plan. I think the outcome and the tenets of Regenstrief's strategic plan is going to be very important to answering your question, Titus, is can we turbocharge collaboration here? Second thing is that I just want to acknowledge that Dr. Patzer has come in and very much put IHIE Regenstrief collaboration on the front burner. There's a lot of things hanging on we have to wait and see what the Regenstrief strategic plan, how that die gets cast, but our conversations about collaboration have been hopefully a piece of consideration informing that. The piece that Shaun, and it's not necessarily a downer, but it is a reality, is that I wish both our organizations were less resource constrained, because nothing squashes a good idea faster than nobody will pay for it. But I think that between the leadership of the Institute and the leadership of IHIE being focused on identifying more resources, but also nirvana is if we can have a collaboration that creates resources. And sometimes that's where we might focus first if we can find those projects.
The chat group is asking to bring the chat and the presentation together. What is the future of AI with IHIE? So another utilization of AI.
The future is bright. I will say that's what the future is. I think I'll just say this. To make effective AI, you need good training data. Since we are in the healthcare delivery, and healthcare outcome space, we have outstanding data from the IHIE that could be used for training these new powerful models. Figuring out how to do that, both from a financial perspective and from a technical perspective, I think presents a great deal of opportunity. There are a lot of places in the country or in the world even that have this kind of data to train the new AI models.
Hi, I work in a lab basically just across the street, and we study hypertension and heart disease. These are highly prevalent things in the population, but we're researching very specific molecular or genetic mechanisms or questions. And so my question to you is, how can we incorporate IHIE's resources into our existing research strategies, or do you have any examples of collaborations with wet bench scientists?
I'm aware of some. It's much less so. We are kind of a clinical health services research focused area, less so on the bio. But one of the areas where that I think is very interesting could bridge them. We haven't done this enough yet. Have you heard of the term PWAS? Yeah, okay, yeah. We are set up with the biobank specimens and the clinical data. We could easily do PWAS studies. You'd have to find the money for sequencing the specimens, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We supported some mice research for the opioid, for that grand challenge. There's lots of ways, and I could share with you more. We do have a data core, and Bob Nist is right between us here, who leads the group that takes data requests for the IHIE data. So, I mean, you can always talk to Bob or the data managers about that as well.
Thanks.
From the online chat, the original INPC model was designed such that each participating organization owns a piece of the pie, separate schema. IHIE bridges all pieces of the pie to appear as a single record while keeping ownership clean. Is this still the current approach?
I can say that the model for the INPC has not changed, in that every organization maintains it, the ownership of their data does not change. So if you join the INPC, you sign a version of the same agreement that existed 30 years, although it's been through changes about every 5 years. And your joining a data cooperative, your organization is joining a data cooperative in which you lend your data for everybody's benefit, and you can access everybody's data for your benefit, but your data is maintained by the ownership. Your organization continues to own your data, which is sometimes I have to remind our team, and sometimes I have to remind people at Regenstrief. Regenstrief does not have any data, and IHIE does not have any data. We don't own any data. We are able to access data that's in our stewardship. So that model has been what's enabled the IMPC to exist for 30 years. And by the way, there's a governance body, you may have heard of the IMPC Management Committee, which basically makes all the decisions about how the data can or cannot be used. If there's a new idea for how data might benefit someone and the management committee says yes, then we implement it. And if the management committee says no, we can't. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, I still occasionally see patients in clinic who have gone to smaller clinics that don't share their data with IHIE. Is there a plan to expand to smaller clinics over time?
The INPC is like Swiss cheese that's getting fewer and smaller holes over the 30 years. Every new organization that participates fills in a hole in the cheese. There will always be holes in the cheese. The smaller the organization, the harder it is to get them to participate in the INPC for economic reasons, for the reasons of the sophistication of the IT in their enterprise. But there is no prohibition on any healthcare organization and even healthcare adjacent organizations participating in the INPC. We're trying to implement anybody and everybody that has data to share that would benefit from receiving data. So if you're aware of holes in the cheese, there's probably a story behind why that's still a hole.
And one more question. I see patients in clinic who I know were seen in another system but are not linked via IHIE, CareWeb. How are patient matching algorithms being updated to cover the tough matches of multiple surnames, less common characters, etc.? Is there an established pathway to force a match which could go into the learning new methods?
Sure. What I'll say is patient matching is a priority for me as a researcher in patient matching, but also for IHIE, who recognizes that they need accurate identifying information. There is a plan underway with conversations with many people who can help with that. I'm trying to be as vague as possible at this point. But there is a process underway, and we should see some progress fairly soon over the next 12, 16 months or sooner, if not sooner, where we'll be making hopefully some improvements that address some of the issues the person mentioned. All right, well, I think we're right at time, so thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here today.